Good evening, everyone. Breaking news from Capitol Hill. Just moments ago, the House failed to impeach Secretary Alejandro Mayorkas by just 2 votes. It was an embarrassing loss for Speaker Mike Johnson, and we're going to have much more on that dramatic moment just a bit later in the show. But we begin tonight with Citizen Trump. The idea that an American president returns to being an ordinary citizen, just like everyone else after they leave office, is as fundamental to the concept of America as the Bill of Rights. We are a nation with no king, and therefore even the President of the United States is just a citizen, no more, no less. And as such, they are held to the same laws and provided with the same defenses that you and I get. That is what the 3-judge panel on the D.C. Circuit Court of Appeals unanimously ruled today in its crushing legal takedown that, counter to Trump's stated arguments, presidents do not have complete and absolute immunity from criminal prosecution. And thus, Trump must face trial for his alleged attempts to overturn the 2020 election. In their ruling, they reminded Trump what the Supreme Court has already declared, quote, "No man in this country is so high that he is above the law. No officer of the law may set that law at defiance with impunity. All of the officers of the government, from the highest to the lowest, are creatures of the law and are bound to obey it. It is the only supreme power in our system of government, and every man who, by accepting office, participates in its functions is only the more strongly bound to submit to that supremacy and to observe the limitations which it imposes upon the exercise of the authority which it gives." To sum it up for you, Donald, you are not untouchable, even if you did sit behind the Resolute desk at one point. The judges added that to allow Trump such unchecked powers would bring irreparable harm to our very system of government. They write, at bottom, former President Trump's stance would collapse our system of separated powers by placing the president beyond the reach of all 3 branches. Presidential immunity against federal indictment would mean that, as to the president, the Congress could not legislate, the executive could not prosecute, and the judiciary could not review. We cannot accept that the office of the presidency places its former occupants above the law for all time thereafter. Now, remember, this is the first time that an appeals court has had to consider this question, because never before in our country's history has a former president ever been indicted, let alone made these sweeping claims of immunity. And this decision will not only impact Donald Trump's federal election interference case, but also the similar one out of Georgia, where Trump has also made the claim of presidential immunity. And while this court has handed Trump a significant defeat, he has been able to accomplish one of his ongoing goals: delay the trial for as long as possible. As it stands, the case has been on pause for nearly 2 months as he appealed the presidential immunity decision. Trump's last-ditch effort is to grovel to the Supreme Court to take up the case, which they are not obligated to do. It would take at least 4 of the Supreme Court justices to agree to hear the case. If they choose to do so, the question is, how soon would they act? As part of their ruling, the D.C. Circuit Court judges have given Trump until Monday to file his appeal to the Supreme Court, or they will return the case back to D.C. Judge Tanya Chutkan to resume preparations for a trial that could get underway within the next few months. Joining me now is Andrew Weissmann, former FBI general counsel and former senior member of the Mueller probe, and Catherine Christian, former Manhattan assistant district attorney and MSNBC legal analyst. Thank you both for being here. This is the ruling, my friends. This is it. It gave me life today. But it probably shouldn't have taken this long. In my mind, it was brilliantly written. I am going to start with you, Andrew, because yesterday, even the attorneys on this panel, Maya Wiley was here. We were all talking about what our level of freak out was, that this was taking so long. Was it worth the wait?
The decision's great. But just remember where we were at the argument. At the oral argument, there wasn't anyone who was saying that Donald Trump would win.
Right.
One of the best ways of defeating the argument was when Judge Pan, one of the 3 judges, basically got the lawyer to just say, can you just repeat what your argument is?
Yeah.
Your argument is the president can kill people and can't be prosecuted. I mean, to say it was to refute it. Now, this is a really bulletproof decision. I mean, it's just body blow after body blow. It's also beautifully written about upholding the Constitution and what it means to be in America.
Yeah.
And it is clearly written with an eye toward getting the Supreme Court to say no.
Yeah.
So that there is no further delay. In fact, one of the things that we were talking about as we were coming on is a little note in there that says essentially your only recourse, Donald Trump, is the Supreme Court, because if you come back to us, we're not issuing the stay. This is going back. If you don't get the Supreme Court, it's going back to Judge Chutkan.
Yeah.
So it's really clear the D.C. Circuit is fully behind this, as they should be. Yes, would we all liked it to be sooner, because this is a race against the clock in terms of accountability. But we are where we are. I think the next thing to look for is there's no question Donald Trump is going to seek a stay in the Supreme Court.
Yep.
And the real question that we will know very quickly is does he have 4 votes?
That's where I come to you, Catherine, because I can think of 2.
So could we. We were discussing
both of them take fabulous vacations. I don't know that I can think of 4, because as much as I don't have, the greatest reverence for some of the other members of the Trump 6, I can really only think of 2 who would have the audacity to refute this. Can you think of 4?
I'll say no. Andrew and I were discussing this early. We should not assume that because Brett Kavanaugh and Amy Barrett were appointed by Trump that they're going to say, oh, he's our master. We can do what he wants.
Yeah.
I don't think we should assume that. Or Judge Roberts.
I can't see Roberts doing it, honestly.
So the 2, the unnamed 2, yes. But
the vacation twins.
Yes. But the rest, no, I don't think it should be an assumption. The reality is that it is going to be the Supreme Court who will decide whether this case will be tried before the election.
And this is, some of the arguments were so brilliant. And look, I recommend, really honestly, audience, I recommend you read it. It's really not that long. It's 57 pages, but there's a lot of white space on the side, so you can read it pretty quickly. And I'm a very slow reader. But what's brilliant about it is they take his arguments and they break them one by one. Right? I mean, first of all, they say, well, how can it be that Gerald Ford was pardoned if a former president can't be charged? So, I'm sorry, Gerald Ford pardoned Richard Nixon. Yeah. He wouldn't have had to pardon Richard Nixon. Let me just read this part. It says here, President Gerald Ford issued a full pardon to former President Richard Nixon, which both former presidents evidently believed was necessary to avoid Nixon's post-resignation indictment. Before leaving office, President Bill Clinton agreed to a 5-year suspension of his law license and a $25,000 fine in exchange for independent counsel. Robert Ray's agreement not to file criminal charges against him. So what they're saying is, if there's total presidential immunity, and they even said the part that they said, well, the founders knew how to write. If they wanted to write immunity in, they would put it in.
Absolutely.
Yeah. And so, the arguments, what did you make of, it felt like they closed every door. Right?
I absolutely agree. And they clearly are thinking about timing. They wanted to shut this down and to make it as hard as possible, I think, for the Supreme Court to take this. It is normally, you might think the Supreme Court wants to be the court that affirms this, to say, you know what, we're going to take this because it's really important for the Supreme Court to say what is said here, not to reverse it, but so that there's a Supreme Court decision on point. The problem with the Supreme Court doing that is that by trying to say that's the principle, they will in effect be undermining that principle, because if they take this, unless they can do it in lightning speed,
right.
They will de facto be giving him immunity, because it will put the trial off really to beyond the election. And that's one where the American public is entitled to that decision. People keep on forgetting the American public has a right to a speedy trial.
That's correct.
Not just the government, not just the defense.
Yeah.
We sitting here have a right to a speedy trial to know, is the person running for office a felon?
Yeah.
Did he engage in insurrection? Did he engage in what the judges said would be one of the most serious abuses of power that exists?
And, the insurrection part is really interesting. I want to come to you on this, because they make the argument, and then they said Trump's counsel tried to say, well, it's double jeopardy. But he was the impeachment charge was insurrection.
And he's not charged with that by the special counsel.
Exactly.
Many people criticize Jack Smith. Where's the insurrection charge?
Yeah.
Well, now it seems like he's brilliant.
Yes.
Conspiracy against rights, conspiracy to defraud the United States, conspiracy to obstruct an official proceeding. Those are the charges.
Yeah.
That is not what the House and the Senate were looking at.
Yeah, and not only that, they said that an impeachment doesn't have any criminal penalties. So therefore, you can't say it's double jeopardy because impeachment has no criminal penalties. And they even took his own arguments and used them against him. They said, hang on a second, man. When you were defending yourself against impeachment, you said, don't impeach me. I can always be tried later. And now you're saying, but I can't be tried later. Like, they try to have it both ways. To me, the absurdity of being able to argue that actually is proof of two Americas. Because I cannot imagine the ordinary defendants who are filling the D.C. jails because of Donald Trump. They listened to him. They weren't, this circular argument is what's keeping him from being tried. And I think it's outrageous that he can play this game with these ridiculous arguments that seem so easy to refute.
I think it's very biting that they referred to him as Citizen Trump.
Yes, they did.
And as you started off, I think they said that for a reason. You know, you're a former president, and
Yes.
you are just like anyone else. So I think it was very important. They said it was also very important that it was unanimous.
Yes.
That all three were on the same page.
Yeah.
Relinquish what remains of the Allspark.
So Hussein said to you? What?
The other
Hussein
ones
said.
can protect you. They were defeated on our
way.
world, and we will defeat them here.
This was just a diversion! Security, please bring him up. Rabbit, she's already inside. Deeds! Give me an update on that reserve. Boss readiness. What was his name?
Evac, sir.
Right, evac.
She's right in front.
We are facing a heavy, sustained attack. They appear to be after the Allspark aircraft. General! General! Immediately, national security evacuation. Stand down! Check it out! There is a separation.